All right. This has been a long time coming. Welcome back, Stephen Kelley.
Hey, everybody.
My goodness, it's been a while. You are now a part of other podcasts too, right? Because I've been kind of following off and on. Triangle Face.
Well, I have a couple things that I've worked on a little bit, but that's just all pretty much my stuff. I just haven't I haven't had a lot of time to work on it lately. My work's pretty hectic, so I've got like my own website. I've got some stuff I was trying to do for it like that. I'm behind on it's been on a little bit of a hiatus for a couple months, and Triangle Face, I moved up here a year ago, so that kind of made it hard to work on that. But I play around with it every once in a while, but work comes first. So
That's understandable. Last time we spoke, I was all the way like about 25 to 30 minutes away from here too. So
yeah,
and on a DSL connection, which I am no longer doing business with them since I have access to higher speeds now. So that's good.
yeah.
And today figured that it would be kind of appropriate to have you come back on to talk about somebody that truly symbolized the melting pot aspect of this country, and to talk about one of our favorite subjects at the same time, pro wrestling. For those who haven't, yes, for those of you who haven't, who haven't noticed yet, though, actually, I doubt you haven't noticed, but earlier this month we had one of the oldest, most active actors pass away. And then shortly after that, Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, passed away as well. And it kind of took everybody by surprise. It was kind of a 1-2 punch. And I'm a horrible person for saying this. I don't quite remember the actor's name off the top of my head.
Lee.
Yeah, I'm horrible and bad. Feel free to flame me later, but it was just that 1-2 punch that kind of shocked people and took them by surprise. Though it shouldn't have. Lee passed away due to very, very old age. So did Dusty Rhodes, though I would submit that for many more years of his life, he did things that tore up his body than anything else.
He was pretty overweight the entire time too. So I mean,
and he was still athletic when he was, and that's what happens when. That's one of the trade-offs for being a big guy who can do what you can do. It is what it is. But the one thing I remember vaguely seeing him growing up, watching some wrestling on Saturdays, and it was always. The only matches I would see would be on, broadcast TV. I lived out in the country, and I would always see, basically the jobbers getting beat up and everything else because the big matches were for pay-per-views back then, and we would never have access to pay-per-views because we didn't have access to cable. Satellite was out of the question because that was starting to get that was expensive and extravagant and all that good stuff. So, but the one thing I remember about when I first saw him was the polka dots and and everything else. But what are your first memories of him?
Well, when I was younger, I watched wrestling in the very early 80s, and that was primarily WWF at the time. And so I actually didn't watch wrestling for a number of years, so I missed Dusty Rhodes' entire span of being in WWF. And, I didn't, when I was a little kid, I didn't keep up with it. And when I was, up until right before the Attitude Era, like at the end of the New Generation era is when I got back into it. I learned about him through his son because Dustin Reynolds was on there, I believe in '95, and his over-the-top character, they would reference his father and show clips and stuff, and that's kind of where I got into it. And it wasn't until I was able to get on and watch old videos from other federations he was in and stuff like that. And at the time too, he was a color commentator for WCW, and WCW was actually my favorite of the two federations, and I always enjoyed him on color commentary. So I think my first real good memories of Dusty Rhodes was watching things like Starrcade '97 and him doing the color commentary during it.
Yeah, he's bounced back and forth. Like I said, I barely remembered him in the polka dots and everything else. And
yeah, that was like '89 to '90, so it was just a small period there.
But according to one documentary on the WWE Network, he somehow made it work. And you and I definitely remember it to this day. But even people, like a lot of people nowadays comment on how when you think pro wrestling, you think Hulk Hogan. But depending on who you ask, Dusty Rhodes' name will also pop up too. One of my supervisors at my retail job, she had a friend who went to college who personally knew Dusty Rhodes. I think they were a relative or something like that.
Oh, nice.
And so she would, that's how she would recognize him on television and everything else. So I was like, wow, that's pretty nifty. He was kind of a one-of-a-kind person, kind of different from a lot of other people. And when he passed away, one of the things that was, shared on my timeline was somebody saying I wasn't a huge pro wrestling fan, and going through the whole spiel about, how somebody was suffering from, cancer and everything else, going through rounds of chemo treatment. And I actually pasted it into our show notes here that we were setting up for the show. And somebody going by the name of Homer Shadowheart, he posted this on June 11th. And here's what they had to say. I'm not a fan of pro wrestling, but when my sister Jeannie was in remission from leukemia, we went to Las Vegas. She was still bald and very thin, was a huge fan of the WWF. I guess some big event was in Vegas at that time, as there were WWF stars all over the place. She and I were eating at a restaurant at a hotel. Jeannie looks over and sees like 8 of these guys sitting there eating. He said, "Oh my God, I would love to go get their autographs, but I just can't do that. I look awful." I grabbed a handful of napkins, walked toward the table where the wrestlers were eating. I know it was rude, but Jeannie was my best friend, so I was going to be rude. As I was walking, I ran into Barry Windham, who was also walking toward the table. I said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but my sister over there would love to get your autograph. She just went into remission from leukemia and thinks she looks awful." Windham then said, "Fuck you, I'm eating, go away." I turned to walk away, and when I did, I hear a voice say, "Hey man, what did you need?" I turned around, it was Dusty Rhodes. So I walked over and told him what I had asked for. He dug in a duffel bag he had pulled out a WrestleMania shirt and a Sharpie. He looked around the table and said, "We are all going to sign this shirt." He looked at Wyndham, who had sat down by now, and said, "If you have a problem with that, I'll hurt you bad, boy." The shirt was signed by all Dusty had as for Jeannie's name when he signed it. I thanked him and apologized for interrupting their meal. As I walked away, I could feel someone behind me when I got back to Jeannie. She was crying as I gave her the shirt. Then I heard someone say, "Excuse me." It was Dusty Rhodes. He leaned down, kissed Jenny's cheek, and said, "You look great, hon, and you are my hero." That was the highlight of our trip. Jeannie died roughly a year later. I don't know anything about Dusty Rhodes as a wrestler, but I know he was a good human being, and I'm always sad when good human beings die. R.I.P. Dusty.
It's an awesome story.
Yeah. I think reason why, I was, going through some stuff online, and, I found a clip of Wyndham kind of disagreeing with Dusty's booking decisions or booking style, or they just had a different thing. And have they always had issues with each other?
No, I know Dusty had a lot of enemies back then. I mean, anytime that you're the promoter for a federation, you're going to rub people the wrong way. And that, I don't know exactly when that took place or anything, but he very well could have, been pretty high up into something at that point. So knowing he had a WrestleMania shirt, I don't know, that was probably in the early 90s, but because that person doesn't have a date on there, do they? But Dusty had a lot of power either way, and he was the head booker for WCW for quite a while, and after Flair left, so I mean he had a lot of power, and I wouldn't be surprised if people begrudgingly went along with what he said, and they may not have liked it. So
right, and that's why I thought about it and go, well, he was decorated career, but not always without controversy. And I know it's kind of late into the game, but he was billed as 6'2", 275 pounds, from Austin, Texas, and of course the bionic elbow was his signature move. At least he was 3-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. He had World Tag Team Championship reigns, including a 6-man Tag Team Championship, numerous TV title reigns, and U.S. title reigns. And I think that's, there was, other than local groups, he never really got any major championships beyond that.
Yeah.
Which I find kind of sad.
Well, at the time, you have to remember, though, the NWA title was, the be-all, end-all for a long time. And Central States Wrestling, he started out actually around where we are, and he was actually the Central States Wrestling champion for a while, and that was Kansas City. That was their main federation, pretty much, this area.
Right. So, but Vince McMahon never said, "Hey, let's give you a run." Yeah. It was just like, as if to say, "Okay, you may have been really big over here and over here, but you're just another guy here."
Yeah. Well, and McMahon also he's kind of lends himself towards wanting the big muscle guys to be the champion. He has a set look that he goes with for world champions. Usually it's, that has started to falter in the few years, but for the longest time he would go for someone with, a great physique over someone that could wrestle, or, and, very few and far between would someone like Mick Foley, get the title or something like that.
Where it would get ratings, and for sure, and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that Rhodes basically said is, if you're not in this to win the world championship, why are you in this business? And I think that inspired people like Diamond Dallas Page to keep striving for the big belt and everything else. So, but I think some individual wrote for the Huffington Post that he bridged the racial divide. Phil Perrier, stand-up comedian, talked about how, basic, and this is really cool, by the way, because apparently Muhammad Ali was influenced by pro wrestling. Muhammad Ali was influenced by a guy named Gorgeous George. Oh, go away, you freaking ad. I hate you. Yeah. And in turn, Ali influenced Dusty Rhodes. Because I think one of the things Gorgeous George basically said is, something along the lines of, people practically paying you just to shut up. The flamboyancy, the outrageousness of things that you say, and that sort of thing, and I think Rhodes, adopted that. So I'm like that was really cool. And another cool thing that he did was, and I think this is the one thing that really got people behind him, was his hard time speech. And I'm assuming you read it. It was like Starrcade '85. It was going to be him and Flair for the world title. And I'm assuming Flair and his faction put him out of action storyline wise for quite a while.
Well, if I recall, and I could be wrong with the lead up, but I know during their larger feuds, the Four Horsemen, quote unquote, broke Dusty's arm and stuff like that. So, I mean, that they messed him up for quite a while in storylines and everything. And for him to, come back after that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. And it was the one thing that when he did this speech, people at first seemed indifferent, and then all of a sudden he goes into the whole spiel and they're like, yeah, and they're getting behind him. And I'm not going to do the whole mimicking of him because I would butcher it, but he in his hard time speech, he says, first of all, I would like to thank the many, many fans throughout this country that wrote cards and letters to Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, while I was down. Secondly, I want to thank Jim Crockett Promotions for waiting and taking the time, because I know how important it was. Starrcade '85, it is to the wrestling fans. It is to Jim Crockett Promotions and Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. With that wait, I got what I wanted. Ric Flair, the world's heavyweight champion. I don't have to say a whole lot more about the way I feel about Ric Flair. No respect, no honor. There's no honor amongst thieves in this place. He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family. You don't know what hard times are, Daddy. Hard times are when the textile workers around this country are out of work. They get 4 or 5 kids and can't pay their wages, can't buy their food. Hard times are when the auto workers are out of work and they tell them to go home. And hard times are when a man has worked at a job for 30 years, and they give him watch, kick him in the butt and say, hey, a computer took your place, Daddy. That's hard times. That's hard times. And Ric Flair, you put hard times on this country by taking Dusty Rhodes out. That's hard times. And we all had hard times together. And I admit, I don't look like the athlete of the day. Supposed to look. My belly's just a little big. My honey's a little big. But brother, I am bad, and they know I'm bad. There were 2 bad people. One was John Wayne, and he's dead, brother. And the other is right here. That's your boy Ric Flair. The world's heavyweight title belongs to these people. I'm going to reach out right now. I want you at home to know my hand is touching your hand for the gathering of the biggest body of people in this country, in this universe, all over the world, reaching out because of the love that was given me. And this time I will repay you now, because I will be the next world's heavyweight champion on this Hard Time Blues Dusty Rhodes Tour '85. And Ric Flair, and that's your boy, let me leave you with this. One way to hurt Ric Flair is to take what he cherishes more than anything in the world, and that's the world's heavyweight title. I'm going to take it. I've been there twice. This time when I take it, Daddy, I'm going to take it for you. Let's gather for it. Don't let me down now, because I came back for you. For that man upstairs that died 10, 12 years ago and never got the opportunity to see a real world's champion. And I'm proud of you. Thank God I have you, and I love you. I love you. And that's I think that's when he took off right really took off because
Yeah.
everybody, because people were thanking him for, you know, talking about the plight of you know, people being out of work and things like that.
Well,
80s
that
was
that
pretty.
that sort of character always, resonates. You look at Stone Cold Steve Austin, the everyman character is someone that, you can have your characters in wrestling that are like the millionaire, stuff like that, but you get the guy that's down on the ground level and with the people and everything, and they're going to get over more than anything. And Rhodes was
Oh,
basically like the Stone Cold of his day with that. Not the same character whatsoever, but he wasn't the over the top comic book, muscled physique Greek god type character. He was just a dude whose dad was a plumber, and he just happened to go out there and kick ass for a living.
yeah. Your favorite matches with the guy?
Well, that Starcade or that '85 match is really good. Really, my favorite matches of his, if you can go and find them, are he did a series of matches in the late '70s and early '80s with Harley Race, and those are really good. But I'm also a big fan of Harley Race, so watching those two wrestle, that was like one of his first big feuds, and that was really interesting to watch.
And I think he also kind of, you know, mirrored Hogan to a point, or Hogan maybe mirrored him, I don't know which, at this point, where he was like a hero for a long time, and then that whole NWO storyline, all of a sudden he joins the NWO.
Yeah.
I don't know if it made sense to do that or not, but
Well, they just the whole original premise of the NWO was that it was a WWF invasion of WCW, pretty much. So anyone that was there that was formerly WWF eventually joined the NWO. Because you had, it was revealed that Ted DiBiase, and he was the founder or the funding of it, and Virgil came in as the head of security, and then you also had, anyone that in any way was originally aligned basically jumped ship onto it. So then it got out of hand when everyone in the entire roster was a member of the NWO. There was 3 different NWO factions and everything, and Rhodes wasn't in there for very long either. He kind of backed off to where he was, he was still like a heel commentator, but by the time when Bobby Heenan really took off on there, he kind of played the middle ground a little bit, mellowed it out just slightly.
well, like and it was, kind of rare for Heenan to kind of get over as a color commentator. It was just like, because most of the time Heenan was comic relief, commentator, villain type of person, and then that happens. And then the roles kind of get switched, and it's kind of weird. But what kind of struck me was Rhodes was involved in the industry pretty much until his death.
Oh yeah,
like
NXT was kind of his baby. It seems like him and Triple H.
And people were commenting on how, a meeting in his office, he would light a candle, put his feet on the desk, and just paint a canvas of his quote unquote vision, next vision of sorts, and boom, there you go. It was kind of interesting, kind of weird, and everything else. But I will say that if it weren't for him, you wouldn't have what's now called the classic Dusty finish, where if I'm not mistaken, that match between Samoa Joe and Kevin Owens was kind of a tribute to that, to a point.
There was a couple of Dusty finishes at the last pay-per-view. What a Dusty finish, literally, because some people misapply it to something that it isn't. People sometimes will say that a Dusty finish is whenever someone get like run-ins start happening. But what a Dusty finish literally is, and this happened with the Dean Ambrose Seth Rollins match a couple pay-per-views ago, where the face basically wins the title, but due to something that the heel does or something to that effect, it gets reversed. So, like, you'll have situations where I recall there was a few times where like Sting would seemingly win the title from someone, and then you'll find out that Hogan had a weapon, so they'll throw the match out completely, and Hogan retains. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it gives the audience, the audience is all excited, and they just take it away from them.
I meant, more along the lines where it's just not a conclusive real finish.
Yeah.
So because like that match wasn't a conclusive finish. I'm probably wrong on that one, so that's all right.
No. Well, no, I mean, and it people use it sometimes as a pejorative because there's a lot of times where wrestling federations will have like long runs where like constantly you'll be having, things happen where the NWO is a prime example. When they started out, there was a time where every single match almost had the NWO running out and messing up the match or something. And that was kind of, people were like, oh, there's Dusty. Dusty's doing his normal stuff,
Because like, one of the hallmarks of that is it's not a definitive conclusion. Things are kind of up in the air, and things like that. And I kind of noticed that with Joe and Owens, where referee tries to get it back in the ring. Mm-hmm. They don't get it back in the ring. The match is thrown out.
Double count.
They're still fine. Yep. Where it's just, this isn't over yet. They're going to meet again, probably, something like that. But yeah, I did notice that with Ambrose and Rollins, where Rollins, pulls the referee over into harm's way. A new referee comes out, but Ambrose wins by disqualification.
Yeah.
and left that up in the air, and I'm like, oh man. Because I was like, wait, he won? I was like, wait, there's a punchline somewhere.
Yeah, you could tell that it wasn't the time for that. You could just tell that wasn't going to last very long.
I was like, wait a minute. I'm waiting for it. Yep, he's still going to retain.
That happened to Brian Kendrick, I think. He won the title for like 2 seconds, and then it got reversed on him, I think. Can't remember who he's wrestling, but something weird like that went down.
Oh man, that was. But some of the controversies throughout his career. There was the whole booking thing, though. He wasn't the first wrestler to be Booker at the same time. There was Kevin Nash who did that not without controversy.
Well, there's worse people too, because you had like Vern Gagne. Made his own son a champ who had no business being a son. Eric Watts, or being a champ. Eric Watts did that with his kid. That stuff always happened, and it was like almost a trope. Like, oh, here comes the owner and his son. The Von Erichs, that's another one.
And then there was one of the incidents I was reading about when Ted Turner bought what would then become known as World Championship Wrestling. The Road Warriors, took one of their spikes and jabbed it into, Dusty's head, and blood was gushing out, and Rhodes was fired because of it.
Wow.
Because they were trying to not have blood or anything like that, and it's just like, I think it was during the Bill Watts era too, wasn't it?
Oh, was that back when they were trying to be like super hardline, like good, like rated G basically for kids and stuff? I know Watts made a bunch of bad decisions back then, and then again, Watts, if I recall, was the same person that introduced Harlem Heat as like slaves, pretty much. So he had his, originally, originally they were called Cain and Abel, and they were let out by a Southern plantation owner character with chains and everything. It was you see a picture of it and you're like, ooh, this was different times, huh? and I don't think Watts realized exactly how controversial that was going to be. And when everyone got mad, he was like, "Oh crap, Harlem Heat, huh? We'll do that instead."
Who was the quote unquote plantation owner, by the way?
Oh, it was crap. His name was let me look it up real quick here.
Was it Colonel Lee Parker? Because
yeah,
if it was.
It was. I couldn't remember his name in WWF.
because here's the ironic part about that. Harlem Heat, later on, in the beginning phases of NWO and all that, all of a sudden he winds up as a co-manager with Sister Sherry.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is not making any sense to me. What the hell? Why is a Southern dude co-managing a team that's allegedly from the rough streets of Harlem, New York? What the hell?
In itself isn't much better than them being, that's just as much of a stereotype as them being brought to the ring with shackles and stuff. But at least it was, for that time, a little less ridiculous, I guess.
Oh my God.
But yeah, Watts was notorious for not really understanding his stuff pretty much. This is, I wasn't there, but I've read plenty of books and shoot interviews and stuff, and people don't usually have much good to say about him, so I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure some good stuff came out of it, but when you have things like "Thou shalt not throw somebody over the top rope,"
oh God, that was awful.
Things like no mats on the outside of the ring
to discourage people from jumping out and stuff, I'm assuming.
And so hey, all these other groups that are doing it with little padding outside the ring, they're all a bunch of wussies. Ironically, for a long time, ECW didn't do that either.
Yeah.
And Joey Styles commented on that and referred to the Athletic Commission of New York City as a bunch of sissies. But
I love watching old wrestling matches from that period, because I want to say that there was a match at a Starrcade where Ron Simmons lost the title, or no, it was a match for the title, but he ended up not getting it because someone threw themselves over the top rope and he got disqualified. And not being used to those weird rules like that, I was watching it just like, what?
Yeah. Like, and at least you eventually had somebody watching over WCW that knew that he didn't know a damn thing about pro wrestling. And then Eric Bischoff came in, but Bischoff marketed himself as a television guy, even though he actually had previous experience in the industry. And then from there things got better for a while. But as we all know, money will only solve so many problems.
Yeah.
So, but Rhodes was in a lot of companies and a lot of I think he even was in TNA for a while too.
Yeah. During the time when they had a period where he was kind of like their head booker for a while, and TNA actually this past week after he died had a little clip, and it showed some of him being in there. That's one of those things a lot of people don't realize is he did disappear from WWE and everything for a while, and he did his own thing. Yeah, Goldust was even in TNA for a little bit, even though he was unfortunately looking rough at that point, and he looks really good now, but man, he did not look good at the time.
Yeah. And I've noticed that, the whole American Dream thing kind of, there was kind of a play on words throughout, the years with the Undertaker's American Badass gimmick.
Yeah.
Even his son Dustin Rhodes, when he went back to WCW for a while, they tried to bill him as the American Nightmare.
Oh yeah.
Play, which Which, now that I think about that whole promo, cracked me the hell up because it looked like, okay, here comes this cool looking Undertaker knockoff,
Yeah.
and then the
Are you talking about
proverbial
when he
sweep.
was 7?
Yeah, it was just like, it's like, the whole spiel of, okay, no, we're not doing this. No, no, this is
Apparently,
stupid.
as far as I know, that was one of the most expensive like wrestling entrances ever, and that was actually supposed to be a character that was going to stick around. And this character is called Seven. He would float to the ring and do all this other stuff, and they had like this weird like rope system that carried him in. Apparently, what happened is standards and practices at the time flipped out because of his promos, where it showed him looking into he was supposed to be like Freddy Krueger or something. I don't quite understand what they were going with it. And he was like looking into the windows of little kids, and they thought it had a really big pedophile vibe going with it, so they nixed the character. But since they had hyped it up so much, they had to have him do it at least once. That way they could kill it off right then. Similar thing happened. Right about that same time, they had a character named Berlin show up, and he was supposed to be like some kind of industrial German, goth guy. He had Rammstein music. Well, Columbine happened the next day, and so immediately he turned into Rocky IV. They just went an entirely different direction with it and screwed it up. So they were really reactionary about that around that same time.
Which Berlin was really Alex Wright. So
yeah, there was just them trying to repackage Alex Wright.
Which, oh my god, so many companies, so many storylines. And I'm kind of seeing Kevin Owens as the American Dream 3.0, except he's from Canada.
Yeah,
which is ironic. The guy that doesn't quite have the body but has the ability, and although he's more of a jerk now, but mainly because he's not in it to make friends, he's in it to make a living.
They'll eventually turn him babyface. I mean, if you ever listen to him on podcasts and stuff, he sounds like the coolest dude ever. Like his hobby is going to zoos. And it's like you can't really have that guy be the biggest, bad guy on the company for the whole time.
Right. And but Rhodes had an influence on him as well as many other people. And at some point I may create some sort of fan video where there's a montage of memories and things like that from a lot of people, and to briefly touch upon it in light of like recent current events that were very, very tragic in South Carolina. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, Rhodes is a perfect topic because Rhodes embodied that melting pot spirit. You had plenty of conflict between different points of view from time to time, but he was still able to melt some stuff together and make it work.
Well, and the thing that always confused people about his gimmick is that he essentially was a redneck, a big white dude that sometimes would wear a cowboy hat, but he talked like he was a black guy from up north. And that was for a while he had his manager Sapphire, just kind of pushing that along. It was this whole he was the everyman. But he wasn't just the everyman for white folks. He was the everyman for everybody. He was
agreed. And I think it was kind of shattering a stereotype myth because frankly, there are people from the South who may not sound like they're from the South.
Oh yeah.
And we kind of forget that, and we try to stereotype them, and then we try to stereotype people up north, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, and say, oh well, that's classic Midwest or classic East Coast mentality or some nonsense like that. And we kind of forget that everybody is different to a degree, similar but similarities abound, but a little bit different. And I'm like, the bionic throwing a bionic elbow onto all of that, is a thought I relish. But I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch some of his matches. I think he introduced Dustin Rhodes to the business, his son, and they even tagged in WWE once.
I still think one of the coolest things recently was they had a match, and I honestly don't remember when it was. I don't think it was WrestleMania, but it was a couple years ago, and they actually had because Dusty Rhodes has two sons, and he may have more kids that I'm not aware of, but he definitely has Dustin, which is Gold Dust, who is in his 40s, and he's got a much younger son that's closer to our age, who's Cody Rhodes. And he actually was able to be their manager for a match. And I thought that was really awesome. A couple in there for a little while, because he never left. When he finally did go back to WWE, he became one of the head bookers for NXT. So he was there, on the ground floor that whole time and, helping out new people. And, the fact that he had his two sons there who really didn't know each other when they were younger because of the age difference and everything, everybody was just working as a family. It was awesome to watch.
Oh, I agree, and I'm trying to remember what thought I was having. Like Rhodes, basically for the majority of his life was in that business. He even had a noted feud in ECW. The guy was practically everywhere.
Yeah,
and I thought that was pretty cool, and I thought that was pretty cool that he had a match with Randy Orton. Texas Bullhorn match or something like that.
That was when he was the legend. Orton was doing the legend killer gimmick, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where he was challenging people from the past.
Oh yeah. I liked, I just liked reading about it, hearing about it, and now that I'm a subscriber to the network, I can actually go back and take a look at it. Although I will have my complaints about what they did to certain entrance themes. I understand why they did it.
Yeah. ECW is apparently is really hard to watch sometimes because ECW, when it first started and was on TV, they were just like a local TV show. They used all licensed music. So you'll be watching like a match, and all of a sudden they'll have a little promo where it's got this terrible elevator music in the background, and it was probably like a Rob Zombie song or something originally, but they don't have the rights to that, so it's like you're like, wow, this sucks.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things ever. It would be really cool if they had notes of all the music that was played, and then all of a sudden the artist just read into them, or the appropriate people say, you know what, don't worry about the royalties, just quit butchering this product.
They could even it's really hard to watch New Jack, especially because if you're familiar with him, his music plays during his match. Because New Jack, all he would do is he would come out and beat the crap out of someone with weapons. That was all his gimmick was. And it would play Natural Born Killers the entire time, and they can't get the rights to that. So I don't know if they still. I haven't tried to watch one of them in a while, but I need to go back and see. But I noticed that happened with like in ECW especially, like they had cover songs of popular music, but rights issues and everything else, it just it makes it hard.
Right. But editing Diamond Dallas's Page's entrance theme, like thinking to myself, you do realize that they altered it just enough to where they couldn't get sued. So why are you altering it now?
It might be if it was some of the songs that Jimmy Hart owned. For a while, Jimmy Hart wasn't working with WWE, so maybe they need to. Maybe it's something like that, because there was a few WCW had different companies that did the stuff, and Jimmy Hart actually produced a lot of their music, so it might have been that situation because he was in TNA for a while back in like 2010.
Right.
But I don't know if that's because I'm pretty sure he's there now because he hosts a show, I think, on the network. So I don't know.
I mean, a lot of it I can understand why, and most of it you can just skip past the entrance promos and watch them like Goldberg. They altered to the modern theme, which
different music. Oh,
they
that
used
sucks.
this modern. No, they used this modern WWE theme, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, that's a public domain song. You'll see Goldberg's theme on like World War II videos and stuff. Like,
I'm like, well, what the? I don't understand their decision behind it. Maybe it'll change when Vince McMahon passes away. I don't know, but
yeah.
But just throughout the years, though, it's amazing kind of seeing people come and go and being there for many years, and now that person, the influential figure who convinced DDP to go for the world championship and influenced others, is now gone. And not to mention, I like your thoughts on the whole TMZ thing, posting the 911 call.
Yeah, that was awful.
I didn't bother listening to it. I figured.
No, I didn't want to even do it. That's rough.
Because like, did they go too far?
Well, and it's like it's kind of like what happened when Robin Williams died. At one point, there was like I can't. It might have been CNN because this sounds like something CNN would have done. They had a helicopter flying over his house, and like, here's Robin Williams' house, and he's dead inside there, and we're gonna find out, blah blah blah. And it was like just in horrible taste. And it's
that was ABC, by the way. I only remember
ABC?
because because of Maddox. I remember it was ABC, and they eventually quit doing that shortly after public criticism.
It's like it's one thing to want to break the news like, hey, we've learned that this person has passed away, but you can't go and like, let's get a camera there and let's take it. There comes a point where we don't need to know. I don't want to know. That's sad. And it's disrespectful. It's no worse than when people get mad when like military funerals get picketed and stuff. That's basically what's going on. But since they're in the public eye, people are like, it's cool. And
it's not like when I was pointing out how people were putting, like, say, Steve Jobs on a pedestal, and I'm trying to remind people he was human too, like everybody else, and he had his faults. And people thought I was talking bad about a dead guy. No, it's I didn't post a 911 call or anything like that. But I've got my limits too, and that was one of them. And I read about that, and I was like, oh, great. Because to me, later on, like years down the road, that'd be one thing to throw something like that in a documentary. The Panic Boys, he's fallen, he can't get up, and that sort of thing, and then fade into that and go back through the person's life and all of that. But shortly after, could be seen as in poor taste too.
I will hand it to the people that frequent the TMZ website. If you actually look up that article where they post it, and I'm not saying to do it, but I'm just going to skip the whole top part, but everyone just is like slamming them. Someone says, I wouldn't have put this out there. Privacy should be respected, even if the person taking the call wasn't the best. Good grief. This is more of a personal thing, I would think. And these are people that go specifically to TMZ to read gossipy stuff, and they're kind of like, okay, this is in poor taste, guys. Really? So
yeah. And seriously, they note how the operator sounded annoyed and all that. Well, seriously, Imagine what an operator deals with every day,
Yeah, oh,
and
yeah. And that you're
and
not going
all
to
of
get the
that,
best people on those kind of jobs, I'd imagine.
because you may have people call that line and say, "Hey, I think aliens have landed," or some stupid thing
Yeah.
like that. So blaming the operator for not taking it seriously. They probably had a ton of calls as well, and that were probably absolutely ridiculous and was wasting their time, and they were probably trying to get through their shift. We don't know what was going on in that person's mind. Um, so don't know, but yeah, that was the one thing that I thought was like, okay, we're celebrating their life. That's great, but that was taking it a bit too far.
The one thing that I hope doesn't happen, and WWE is a much better company than it was when they used to do this kind of stuff. I'm really worried that they'll turn this into a storyline. I hope they don't, because they did that, if you recall, when Eddie Guerrero died. And as long as they could tone down, Cody Rhodes' character or something, and have him all of a sudden, rebrand himself, or something like that. But if they try to do an actual character out of it, I'm going to be kind of disappointed. But we'll see.
Um, yeah, and who knows what's going to happen. I don't know. I will say it was cool to see the Rhodes brothers have a tag team title run
That was awesome.
and all of that. That was pretty cool. And it was kind of cool seeing the whole dynasty thing pop up, and bam, there they are, and all of that. And I'm definitely gonna have to go back and watch some of those old matches, because that that was that proved that you don't have to be chiseled to be popular. You just have to know how to connect to people.
Yeah. Well, and
So
like in some of his best feuds that I would say probably would be his feud with Flair. And I haven't seen everything, but his feud with Flair was good. His the stuff he did against Race was really good. And he even, if you want to go pretty far back, he had a feud with Dory Funk Jr. that was pretty decent. But, it's old wrestling, so it just kind of depends on what you're in the mood for. Because sometimes old, like WWF for me, and from the 70s, is hard to watch. But it just kind of depends on, what you're wanting to watch. Because they still would do some awesome stuff. It's just, it was spread out.
right.
Northern wrestling is a lot different than Southern wrestling, which is what I grew up kind of being into. So,
Oh, absolutely. And definitely we'll have to take a look at some of his older stuff. But I think that was a very good episode we just did. I do need to update the feed on it so that 85 will appear. But other than that, I think we're doing pretty good. It was good having you back, man. It's been a while.
Yeah. Sometimes I should be able to get on here. I don't know. My work's kind of crazy because I work more or less the opposite shift that you do. So it's kind of, well, I work like a mid shift more than like a day shift. So, but
right. And
maybe one of these weekends or something, get together on there.
yeah, because and like I've discovered that every now and then I can definitely wake up a little early before I go in and kind of do something. So I'm like, okay, that I can handle as long as it's not on a constant basis, but every now and then kind of rotate in and out. Because Shaggy, one of the things that he'd have issues with is, what are we going to talk about this week? And I can understand that too. And fortunately, I've been able to go, hey, here's something. Recently got into Python programming, and of course I can talk about this new phone later down the road, ZTE lever, LTE, which now I'm like, now I'm like no longer as much of a Samsung fanboy as I used to be.
After what happened.
So I dropped the Samsung phone, right? I bought a case for it to protect it. It didn't quite protect it like it should have. And so the screen got cracked and the screen underneath got damaged. And come to find out that replacing the screen, I might as well buy a new phone because it wouldn't have been worth it. So
oh man,
I got the whole replacement plan on it and everything else on this one. And I realized that after looking at these specs, for basically it was, other than, big screen size and all of that, it was slightly better than my Galaxy S2. Actually, it was much better. The only thing I miss is 10 plus megapixel camera, but this one's 8 on the back, so
it's not going to be much different at all as long as you have something over like a 5 megapixel. You can't really, I mean, I doubt you're going to be trying to take professional photos with that.
Well, and
with a zoom lens.
And honestly, there are attachments for smartphones now to where, or hell, you can take a pair of binoculars and it actually works, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's weird how that works. So, my attorney friend who is moving away from Holden, going to Mississippi at some point, I think he's finally getting to the point where somebody's buying his old place. I have another full-blown system, actually 2 because of them. He pointed out that, a lot of those old cameras with the glass lens, the body may not be worth anything, but you take the old lens off, put it onto the new digital cameras, and they'll work just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just all kinds of cool tricks you can learn. But anyway, I think this went really, really well. So,
oh yeah, hope to be back on sometime.
So, entertaining yourself, educate yourself, empower yourself. If you have any topics, suggestions, ideas, etc., drop us a line, 660-474-0345. Leave a voice message. You can actually text that number too, and we'll get it. And you could very well wind up on a future episode of the podcast, unless you're like, don't just hear us out, and we can do that too. But I'll be updating the website a little bit more and everything else in the near future. It's just, work's been kind of busy and things like that. And believe it or not, I'm still kind of settling in. I now own a real mattress, for example, because my airbed kind of popped just by turning. So I still got to get stuff settled in. So until next time, peace.
See ya.